Hello and welcome back to the Life on the Wrist podcast. Today is going to be a mega episode specifically focused on the Geneva watch auctions that are coming up next month. It's super exciting time period for vintage watch lovers or just watch lovers in general. We're going to cover the major watch auction houses and pick out some of the lots that I'm interested in and I think would be interesting to share with you. Of course, this is only going to be a snippet of the watches that are going to be offered at these auctions. And so in the show notes of this podcast, there are going to be links to each of the watches that I talk about, but also to the individual pieces there will be a link to the entire catalog for the auction. I highly recommend perusing the catalogs because there are some really interesting pieces that I'm not going to cover. So highly recommend doing that. We'll start off with Phillips. Phillips has their Geneva auctions taking place. The first one that they have is the rebirth of mechanical watchmaking, 1980 to 1999. This is an auction, as I mentioned, taking place on November 8th. And the idea is that it is trying to celebrate some of the pieces that were manufactured in the from 1980 to 1999, which is really a pivotal time for watchmaking. This was sort of after quartz watches became super important. This was really the Swiss watch reaction to that and trying to persuade consumers to purchase mechanical watches again. The watches that they have are really, really interesting. I'll admit one of the watches that stands out for me is lot number 7, which is a Vacheron Constantin reference 43032, which is a skeletonized platinum perpetual calendar with moon phase from 1987. It's a 36 millimeter piece. It's believed that there are under 200 examples manufactured in platinum with this skeletonized dial, and I think it's a really exceptional piece. I also think that perpetual calendars from Vacheron Constantin are not celebrated enough compared to, things like Patek Philippe perpetual calendars. I think it's a really interesting piece and a really important integral watch for Vacheron Constantin. There's so many other watches. I didn't really pick out a ton from this specific auction, but there's some really cool early FP. There's an early FP Journe tourbillon. There's a bunch of watches from Blancpain that are really interesting. They've even got Urban Jurgensen's. They've got a 3970 from Patek Philippe, which is quite nice. I'm kind of just scrolling through the lots at this point. They've got one of the Derek Pratt for Urban Jurgensen's, one of the oval pocket watches that he produced. So a really cool example there. They even have a reference 101.026 Langon 1 that I believe was purchased at Cellini in New York in 1999. The list goes on. I recommend that you take a look. Their final lot is actually a Philippe Dufour Duality, which is also a wonderful lot. But take a look at the catalog, but I think the Vacheron is really the one that sticks out for me the most. So that's going to be the 8th of November. On the 9th and 10th of November, Phillips will also be hosting their Geneva watch auction, and they've got a ton of really incredible lots. I'll talk through a couple of them. The first one is that I'll talk through is Cartier from 1925. It's a really beautiful Cartier Cintré. It was manufactured in 1929. It's in 18 karat yellow gold. These are extremely rare, extremely difficult to find in decent original condition. A lot of the times these have dials that have been reprinted or replaced. They've got aftermarket hands. This is to my knowledge, this is as original as it comes. It's got this piece was made in France and then sold in London, and you can see that with the French hallmarks on the watch. it's hard to find these, especially if you don't have relationships with dealers who have a pretty good network, and so when they do come to market, I think there's going to be a lot of interest on them. A watch that I featured on our Instagram page was lot number 145, which is a Audemars Piguet from 1925. What makes this watch really special is it's an 18 karat white gold triple calendar from Audemars Piguet. Complicated Audemars Piguet is very, very difficult to come by. It's something that is really special, and when it does come to market, you know that it's definitely going to be something extremely rare. They made a few examples of these perpetual calendars, but there's really sort of from 1924 to 1967, Audemars Piguet made a total of 176 examples of non-perpetual calendar complicated timepieces, which makes this an extraordinarily rare example. There were two phases during this time period. The first was from 1924 to 1954, and this used the caliber 10 GHSM movements. And then the second phase from 1954 to 1967 used the caliber 9-10 RSQ. This piece has I believe the first movement that I mentioned. What was really cool about this piece as well is it's got incredibly beautiful brigade numbers, a really beautiful dial with the triple calendar complications that I mentioned. It was also, instead of having the signature of Audemars Piguet on the dial, it's actually signed by the Lausanne-based, and I'll probably butcher this, but L'Emeraude, which is a retailer that was based in Lausanne. And again, rare, super rare, really beautifully manufactured. And I kind of like the fact that the Audemars Piguet signature is not on the dial. It underlines the fact that in my opinion, it kind of underlines the rarity of this piece. So if someone looked at this and didn't really understand what it was, they would just think it's some brand from Lausanne. So I definitely think there's going to be a lot of interest on that piece. Moving on, lot number 192, it's a Patek Philippe reference 530. The reason why I absolutely love this piece, and this was another one that was featured on the Life on the Wrist Instagram page, is because this is a stainless steel version of the reference 530 from manufactured in 1942. The reason why this is so rare is that it's believed that there are less than 10 examples that were made in steel, this one being one of those 10. Another thing that's quite rare is of the 10 that were made in steel, 9 of them have two-tone dials. This lot is known for being the only known example with both a two-tone dial and luminous hands, which is incredibly rare. The 530 is a wonderful example of this piece of the reference 530. The reference 530 is a wonderful example of chronographs manufactured by Patek Philippe, and I'm a huge chronograph lover. This one is in incredibly good condition as well. One of the things that I really liked about Phillips is they've started to sort of trace back the provenance of these pieces. So they actually have this excerpt where they basically say the present watch was offered in the historic auction at Christie's Geneva 2010. Notably, the important watches included a Connoisseur's Vision Part 2, where it was offered fresh to the market and sold for 603,000 Swiss francs. It is our understanding that the consignor in 2010 had acquired the present time piece as is in the 1990s, and then since the auction it has resided in the same collection ever since and is now being offered again to the public arena. So it's kind of nice that they have an excerpt about where this watch last sold, as well as maybe it's just a little bit more information about the fact that it is the same owner is selling the watch today. $603,000 back in 2010. I would imagine that it would probably go for maybe a little bit more. It's going to be interesting to see, what the auction market does, considering all the everything that's sort of happened in vintage watches recently. I won't speak too deeply about these specific watches, but there are two reference 1518s that are selling at Phillips Geneva. There's lot 188, which is a 1518 from 1951, and then there's lot 212 that was manufactured in 1945. Quite interesting to contrast the two different pieces. They're obviously 6 years apart. The lot 188 looks like it has quite a high polish to the top of the case and top of the lugs, whereas 212 looks a little bit whoops, sorry about that. Where's my... Oh, I closed lot 212. Hold on, let me open it up really quickly. Sorry about that. Of course, technical difficulties have to come about when I'm trying to speak about these specific lots. But if we move there, so 212 is a yellow gold example, and then lot 188 is actually a pink gold example. But it is quite interesting to look at the differences in the case. I know that they're somewhat close in manufacture year. The pink gold example has an English calendar, and the yellow gold example has a Spanish calendar. Very, very interesting two examples. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how these two watches sort of compare if you look at them sort of side by side, but I'll leave that to maybe you. You can hit us up on our website, our social medias, anything like that. So that wraps up the Phillips auctions. We'll move on to Sotheby's now. Sotheby's has one of their auctions is called Treasures of Time, which is actually one of my favorite auctions that is taking place. Mainly because there's some really exceptional vintage watches here, and you can really see a very similar theme with the watches. With these watches, there's incredible examples from brands like Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constant, A. Lange & Söhne, and the auction is taking place on November 10th. The first lot that I really love is actually lot number 1. It's a Universal Genève Compax chronograph, reference 5922. The reason why this is so exceptional is it's a yellow gold example from 1937, but it has a really beautiful black dial, which is super unique. I love the contrast between the black and the gold, and to find a black dial Compax is quite extraordinary. I also would say that the overall condition of this watch is quite great. So excited to see how that one does. Keeping in the chronograph theme, Vacheron Constant, one of their lots, lot number 10, is a Vacheron Constant Corne de Vache, reference 6087. It's one of the original Corne de Vache watches. Obviously, there's the modern iteration of these pieces, but this reference 6087 is a yellow gold example with a white dial. What's really nice is the dial looks to be untouched in my mind. The case has a little bit of oxidation here and there, which I really enjoy. And it gives it just an additional level of character in my mind. The Corne de Vache was originally introduced in 1958, so this one being from 1955. So this one being from 1958 makes it quite close to the original. Scholarship suggests that of this reference, there's only 28 pieces that were produced in yellow gold, with 6 in pink gold and 2 in platinum. So this is the most common metal, if you want to say common. It's the most common metal, but still a very rare reference, just in general. So a really nice piece there. There's if you weren't able to pick up the reference 1518 in pink gold that is being sold at Phillips, Sotheby's has one. They have a 1518 in pink gold, manufactured in 1948. Again, pink gold pieces are extraordinarily rare. Of the 1518, it's believed that of the 281 examples that were made, 58 were made in pink gold. So pretty incredible to think that there are two of those that I've so far that I've spoken about the watches that are coming up at auction. One of my truly favorite pieces that Sotheby's has, and I know this to some this is going to be it's going to be controversial, but there is an incredible third series reference 2499 that is being sold. The reason why I love this piece is that it's a yellow gold version of the 2499 with a black lacquer dial and Breguet numbers. On top of that, it also has such a unique bit of oxidation on the right-hand side of the case, which makes it so much more unique in my opinion. Of the for the 2499s, there were 349 examples that were made. It's the only known third series 2499 in yellow gold with a black dial and Breguet numbers, which makes it incredibly rare. For the third series, if you expand that to all 2499s, there's only 6 known to have black dials. So it just makes it even more of a rarity. I love the fact that it has 1, the black dial, but 2, the oxidation, because it really makes it stand out compared to any other 2499 that you can find, that you'll be able to find. I will admit the lugs of this piece do look a little bit soft in my mind. I might be wrong. I haven't seen this piece in person, but they do look a little bit soft compared to other 2499s, especially on sort of the outside of the case. So please check out the pictures of this 2499. I know maybe you won't like it, but I definitely enjoy its uniqueness. So that's the first auction from Sotheby's on the 10th of November. They also have their important watches, a part 1 auction that is taking place in Geneva. There are really only 2 lots that sort of caught my eye. There's lot numbered 84, which is a beautiful MB&F Legacy machine number 1. It's the white gold version with the sort of slate gray dial that I really like from 2012. You know that I love the LM1s. It's really my absolute favorite watch. It was awarded the public prize and the best men's watch prize at the 2012 Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève, GPHD. So a notable example. It's also the only reference that is technically being discontinued by MB&F, which is also sort of a cool rarity component of this specific watch. And then the other example that I wanted to talk about is a yellow gold Jean-Claude Killy reference 6036 from Rolex, manufactured in 1952. Pretty cool triple calendar from triple calendar chronograph from Rolex. It's these watches are quite rare. I think yellow gold examples are quite interesting. Most of these pieces were made in stainless steel, with only about 250 of the 880 that were produced that are in yellow gold. So it is, on the rare side of this specific reference from Rolex. Overall, I think the watch is quite attractive. It looks quite good. In my mind, it overall has kept pretty good shape. I'm kind of looking at the pictures. There's a little bit of oxidation on the sort of the crown side where the chronograph pushes, between the chronograph pushers and the crown, which is kind of attractive. If you look on the other side of the case, there's a little bit of oxidation on by the top of the pusher, which I think is quite cool. I can't tell if the case is softer around the edges. It looks like it has its original bevels, at least from what I can tell in these pictures. So it might be I haven't seen it in person, but it does look like it's in pretty great condition. It also has an engraving on the case back that indicates that it was once owned by General Lancelot Perovna, who had a military career where he served as a commando in both France and Burma during the Second World War, and was later given his own command in Malay and Greece in the 1950s. So it's got an inscription on the case back of the watch if you take a look at the pictures. So that will wrap it up for Sotheby's. I'll move on to Christie's. They have their rare watches auction, including watches for ELA. This auction has some pieces from the. I'll sort of read what they wrote about it. But the rare watches auction on 11th of November at the Four Seasons Hotel des Bergeaux in Genève will include a special section dedicated to a collection of exceptional watches offered to benefit the European Leukodystrophy Association, which supports research into leukodystrophies and the families affected by these diseases. So as mentioned, it's going to be taking place on the 11th of November. There were 3 lots that I thought were kind of interesting. Lot number 56 is a Patek Philippe, which has this really nice sort of curved 18-karat white gold case with Breguet numbers. It also has leaf hands. It was manufactured in 1929. For me, it's just an extraordinarily attractive watch. It kind of hits a lot of the components that I find very attractive, one being Breguet numbers, 2 being having leaf hands. It also has sort of the full signature of Patek Philippe, which I think is quite attractive as well, and correct for 1929. 18 karat white gold, so kind of a cool case metal as well. A really exceptional piece that they have is a pocket watch, actually, from 1967. It's the reference 844, which is the open-face minute repeater perpetual calendar keyless lever watch with moon phase. It's the straight line perpetual calendar that inspired the recent straight line perpetual calendar that Patek Philippe released. I love pocket watches. This is kind of cool to think that this is sort of inspired a piece that I think has done really well for the brand, and is sort of the origin of that. I would check it out. Hallmarks are super sharp. From 1960, it was completed in 1963 and then cased in 1967, based on all the serial numbers. And it looks like they also have sort of provenance of the specific piece. It was sold by Christie's Geneva for their November auction in 2004. So kind of cool that it came back to the auction house 20 years later. The last lot from Christie's that I wanted to cover is lot number 93. It's a Rolex reference 6062, manufactured 1952 in pink gold, and it's obviously the triple calendar moon phase watch with star hour markers. What can you say about a 6062? It's an absolute classic. Christie's also documents the origin of this piece. It was originally the original owner bought it privately from the estate of Gordon Bethune, who's the former CEO of Continental Airlines. He was also a very big watch collector. That original owner's family then sold it at Christie's New York in December 2012. It was then in a collection from 2012 until 2019. It then sold at Phillips in November 2019, and then it was in a collection until 2023. And then it sold at the Passion for Time auction in 2023. it was exactly a year ago. The Christie's Geneva auction that took place. Quite interesting that this watch is appearing on the market 1 year after being purchased at the auction. I think it's a really nice piece. It does have oxidation on the case, which is obviously something that I find extremely attractive. If you've listened to this podcast until this point, you can tell that it's sort of a theme. I'd say the case is in overall really good condition. Case looks super sharp. Hallmarks look super sharp as well. It's a really great piece. I'm not too sure who bought it a year ago and then is selling it again. We'll have to see how it ends up doing, but a beautiful example nonetheless. All right. Hopefully you aren't too bored with this podcast, but you're having a little bit of fun looking at these lots with me. The last auction house that we'll cover is Antiquorum. Antiquorum is hosting their important modern and vintage timepiece auction at Antiquorum Geneva on November 9th. I've got a couple really great examples. The first thing to note, they've got something like 677 lots, which is, if you really want to see the breadth of what you can collect or what could be interesting in watch collecting, look at an Antiquorum catalog, because there are so many pieces that are interesting and exciting or can be interesting and exciting for you as a collector. So I encourage you to look at an Antiquorum catalog if you want to. I'll discuss a couple of the lots that I thought were interesting. It took a little bit of time for me to get some of the watches that I think are interesting, at least to me, but I think they hit home a lot with what I find interesting. First is lot number 38. It's a reference E860. It's a Memovox World Timer in 14 karat yellow gold. If you don't know, Memovoxes are one of my absolute favorite vintage watches. I think it's a watch that I've covered extensively on Life on the Wrist, both in video and in text form and through our editorials. This is a World Timer complication of the reference E860 from 1968. Looks to be in great condition. Comes with its original box. It's got a blank warranty registration form, and it also has a copy of the extract. If you want a really great example of a fairly rare Memovox, this is a great lot to look at. Sort of keeping in the perpetual calendar chronograph theme that I have going on with some with the auctions that I've covered so far. Lot number 36 is a Patek Philippe reference 3970. It's a second series in yellow gold. Overall in really great condition. Second series are somewhat interesting to collectors, quite collectible. It was manufactured in 1991. And has obviously the straight batten indices, and making it the second series. It also comes, I think, with the complete set, box papers, which I think is difficult to come by sometimes. A very nice example. I covered this next sort of type of watch at when I covered the Monaco Legend auctions that just took place a few weeks ago. There was a Vacheron Constantin that was cased by it looked like a book, and it sort of had a pop out that came up out of it to, I guess it's sort of like a desk clock, and really cool sort of travel clock. A travel clock piece. And what's cool is Antiquorum has another one of those. It's lot number 607. It's a 18 karat yellow gold travel clock, and what's cool about it, in my mind, is the fact that it has a really nice enamel. The watch actually pops out of what looks like a book. And what's nice about the book is that it has this really beautiful enamel finishing to it with sort of this green and gold motif, which is, I think, quite rare. Just another example of sort of cool things that you can get, or you can look to collect in sort of in this hobby that we all love so much. It last sold at Antiquorum in New York in December of 2007. All right, the last lot that I will talk about is one of the cover lots of the Antiquorum auction, which is the F. Bjorn subscription number 24, which is the last tourbillon Of course, last lot is where I can't speak at all, so I apologize. But it's the last subscription that was sold directly by F. Bjorn, and this example is in platinum. It was sold in 1924, and as mentioned, this is subscription number the subscription 1 was made in 20 numbered examples in platinum, and this was directly sold by F. Bjorn this was directly sold by F. Bjorn, which I think makes it fairly cool. But this version is the subscription 2. There's one unique example in pink gold and one unique example in platinum, which is number 24. And I think this watch, if you are an F. Bjorn collector, is sort of like the end game. If you want a really early version of an F. Bjorn, it's what made him, or I guess it's the essence of what he was making. It's the essence of him as a brand. It showcases sort of the journey that he went on through his his time when making these watches, and a very important lot to be sold. Quite interestingly, that Antiquorum is going to offer it. I'm trying to see if they have any provenance of the specific piece. I wonder if this specific watch was sold to at all previously. It doesn't look like there's any provenance that's listed on this specific lot. So this must be the first time that it is coming to market, or at least coming to market in sort of public auction. The little excerpt, and I think it's a nice one to sort of sum up this specific lot. And I'll sort of just quote it. It says, the F. Bjorn tourbillon subscription exemplifies modern horological art, combining aesthetics, technique, and history. It represents not only a coveted piece for collectors, but also a hallmark of prestige in the watchmaking world. This historic and unique example is a landmark in F. Bjorn's heritage, being both the last subscription sold by Monsieur F. Bjorn and the first platinum tourbillon souverain to receive the Remontoir d'Égalité inscription on his dial. So that's also a kind of a unique part of this lot, and no wonder it's a cover lot. All right, so that sort of wraps up this mega episode for the auctions that are going to be taking place next month. I can't believe that it's already November. It's pretty insane to think that we're really coming to the end of the year. I'm very excited for the New York auctions that are going to be taking place. I think the Hong Kong auctions have taken place, are either going on right now or have concluded. But very excited for these auctions to see how things do and where things go from here. And again, pretty insane that we're wrapping up the year pretty soon here. As I mentioned, there will be links in the show notes of this podcast to all the watches that we have discussed, as well as the auction catalogs. I highly encourage you to take a look at the lots if you have not already. The reason being is, if you are trying to explore the world of vintage watches, it's the best way to get so much information about vintage watches. If you are new to the Life on the Wrist podcast, be sure to follow us. And if you want to get more content from Life on the Wrist, be sure to go to our social medias. There will be links in the show notes to all of it. You can go to our Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. All of it is going to be, there'll be a link in the the show notes of this podcast, as well as to lifeinthewrist.com, where we sort of host most of our content. If you are feeling generous and wouldn't mind rating this podcast, it really does help me out. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and until next time.